Welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast, the podcast devoted to the local music scene in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, here's your host, Matthew Ablan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 64 of the Queen City Music Podcast. This episode of the Queen City Music Podcast is sponsored by Middle Sea Jazz, Charlotte's premier jazz club located at 300 South Brevard Street in Uptown Charlotte. Stop in for Thursday night jazz jams, gospel Sundays every third Sunday of the month, or bi-weekly Wednesdays for Remember Wednesdays. But if you prefer, stay in for the evening and watch their Saturday night live stream, where you'll have access to the best performances Middle Sea Jazz has to offer. And if you want the VIP treatment, get a Baby Grand membership, where life takes you to a higher note. Tickets are now available for January 7th, an evening with Billboard charting smooth jazz artist Willie Bradley. January 13th and 14th, an evening with David Stryker. And on January 20th, come spend the evening with Chandra Corelli, who is featured in the Tyler Perry and BET Plus series, Bro. And on January 21st, there's guitar virtuoso Stanley Jordan. And on January 27th and 28th, the Grammy Award-winning Norman Brown. And if you're in the need for a new instrument or accessories, head over to Midwood Guitar Studio, Charlotte, North Carolina's own boutique guitar shop located in Plaza Midwood. Midwood Guitar Studio not only has the finest selection in boutique guitars, but familiar names like Fender, Martin, Taylor, Two Rock, and many others. Whether it's a guitar, bass, amp, effects pedal, or a much-needed accessory, the knowledgeable and friendly staff at Midwood Guitar Studio will help guide you in the right direction for your next purchase. And if you're in need of some repairs to your instrument, Midwood Guitar Studio now has a luthier on staff. Visit their website at midwoodguitarstudio.com or stop in to see their unique shop at 1517 Central Avenue, Charlotte, North Carolina. This month on episode 64 of the QCMP, I'm speaking with drummer and composer Curtis Wingfield, who's been a staple in the Charlotte music scenes since the late 90s. While Curtis is known for sitting behind the drum kit with jazz-inspired groups such as Jazz is Led, he is equally at home holding it down in the Zac Brown tribute band 20 Ride. But that's not all. He's also a gifted composer who studied jazz composition at East Carolina University. Curtis Wingfield, welcome to the Queen City Music Podcast.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me.
So we met at Middle Sea Jazz some time ago when you guys had Jazz is Led play down there.
Right.
And for whatever reason, we never materialized to get you on the podcast, but I'm so happy that we got you on now. And we're going to spend some time going through like all the stuff that you're doing. Because, man, I checked out your website. You got a lot going on.
Yeah, it's been some busy times.
Well, that's a good thing, especially coming out of COVID.
Absolutely. Very thankful for it.
So, Curtis, are you originally from the Charlotte area?
Not originally. I was born in a little town in Kansas called Spearville, about 600 people there. I moved to Rocky Mount, North Carolina when I was 7 years old. I grew up in Rocky Mount.
Okay.
And, I moved to Charlotte in 1999. Had a good buddy who was living here. I had no opportunities to play music there. Mm-hmm. So, good buddy living here is a keyboard player. He said, "Hey man, Charlotte needs drummers. If you move here, you'll play." I quit my job 2 days later.
There you go.
And moved. Within the first month I was here, I started playing gigs.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Did you start to plug into the system a little bit?
Yeah, I went to, some like open mic jams,
mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. Met a couple key people that, gave me some referrals and that kind of thing, mm-hmm. which is, very helpful. Yeah, I like the Charlotte community that way. Everybody kind of looks out for each other, it feels like.
Yeah, it is a nice community of folks. Doing the podcast, I'm fortunate I get to meet a lot of people. And, man, it was just really nice.
Yeah.
I haven't met anybody that I'm like, that guy's a jerk.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, they're not around for long if they are.
Yeah, I would think so. So fill me in, man. What's your music background?
So I got my first drum set for Christmas right before I turned 3 years old.
Wow.
Little Mickey Mouse Club, Sears catalog dealie with paper heads.
Was it something you wanted or something that was just given to you?
I feel like my mother probably saw it in me.
Yeah.
She's musical, or was. She passed this past April.
Condolences.
And thank you. But she, I think she saw it in me in a young age. She used to tell stories about me walking around singing bass lines for songs instead of the lyrics or the melodies and stuff.
Interesting.
Maybe I was beating on the pots and pans, and they were like, "We got to get this kid something else before he destroys everything." So I got that. I didn't really take it seriously, I don't think, but I think I had demolished it by the time I was 4 years old or something. And at 4 years old, I started taking piano lessons, and I did that until I was 11.
Wow.
So I started reading music around the same time I was reading English. It was all classical based, a lot of like classical competitions and stuff where I would have to memorize 8 to 10 pieces and playing in front of judges and that kind of stuff. All the while in the back of my mind, I wanted either a drum set or an electric guitar. I remember every year circling ones in the Sears catalog for Christmas, what I would want. So by the time I was 11, I was kind of skipping my piano lessons. I was riding my bike to piano lessons, and
sounds like me. I did that with my guitar lessons.
Skipping lessons, and then I got a chance to be in the school band.
Okay.
And I played a snare drum in the school band for 2 years before my parents would let me get a full drum kit. I think they wanted to just see if I would stick with it or not. Maybe.
Probably most parents don't want a drum kit around the house.
In retrospect, I'm kind of glad I went that route because by the time I got the full drum kit, I already kind of had my chops in order a little bit. I knew the rudiments. I could read really well. I mean, I'd been reading music on piano for a long time anyways. So, I remember that first day setting up the kit in my bedroom right next to my bed, crammed in there. And, I think I played all the way through Van Halen 1 about 4 or 5 times and got it all worked out.
Wow.
And, the rest is history from there. I've along the way too, I've picked up other instruments as well. I play some guitar, I play some bass. I think that's a good thing about the piano starting there is I kind of know the theory of it.
Right.
The theory on the piano is very linear.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I can easily, maybe easily, I can eventually work it out on other instruments.
I just never got it. Like, I played piano. I played a little bit in college and in grad school and always tried to learn a little bit more piano. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, I can pluck out 2 octave scales and some chords here and there. But like, being a guitar player, I'm always trying to keep my wrists straight.
Yeah.
Breaking those wrists and bending when I'm playing piano, man, it just was always painful. And I just never physically got piano.
Sure.
Give me anything with strings, a guitar, a bass, a ukulele, mandolin. Like, I'll play all these strings instruments without an issue. Piano is just something that, man, always escaped me.
Yeah, it went a little backwards for me. When I got to guitar and I just wanted to pick out some of that stuff, it was the opposite for me. It kind of hurt my hands and all that kind of stuff. And the theory of it kind of messed with me when I'm looking at a guitar. It's just multidimensional compared to piano being linear.
Yeah.
I mainly those other instruments now though I just use for writing purposes. I don't really have what I'd call chops on any of them. But I know enough to get an idea down and then put it in the hands of an able-bodied musician.
Right. That's a good thing, man.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing I think everybody's got their strong suit.
Yeah.
If instruments or style, whatever. And then when you're putting things together, doing some recording, man, you're going to bring in the people who can really do it more justice than you would do yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And as a drummer, for me, that's, I can't really just, it's not common for me to just write a song on the drums and say, hey guys, do something to this, without having my own creative input. What's the last thing the drummer said before he got fired is, hey guys, I wrote a song.
Well, I definitely want to get into songwriting a little bit with you, but I'm just curious regarding drums. Is that what do you think was the thing that got you into drums? Like for me, when I got into guitar, there was just, I don't know, it was just something about it, the cool factor, seeing these rock guitar guys that I loved, Jimmy Page or Alex Lifeson from Rush, or just strut around on stage and do their thing.
Sure.
What was it for drums for you?
I think it was a combination of things. I think that seed, was probably planted early on when I got that first drum set, at 3 years old. There was something that I think it always came pretty easy to me too.
Right.
It was something that I was good at, from the start, and especially, at 11, 12 years old when I really started getting into it.
Yeah.
I kind of had that same perception as like, being in a band, it's cool. Like I had some buddies that played guitar.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to form a band, that was, I was never really good at sports or into that kind of thing. A lot of my friends were, and my brother was.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it was something that was my own too, something I was good at. But, the drums, I don't know. They just always spoke to me. I remember the first time I heard, John Bonham and Neil Peart and even like Dave Weckl. When I first heard Dave Weckl, it kind of really opened my head up to possibilities. So
how did you ease into, we'll get into it in a little bit, but I mean, I know jazz is kind of your thing. That's the genre you would prefer to play.
Yeah, that is my preferred genre. I love playing all styles, but that one's, for me, jazz is just, it's the most challenging, and you got the most freedom in it, to play it how you feel it.
Did you get into it from like high school jazz band or something like that?
Partially, yes. When I have an uncle that when he found out that I was playing snare drum in the school band, he sent me some old Gene Krupa records.
Okay.
So that was really my first memorable introduction to it. I think I was 11 years old. I still have those records.
Was your uncle a musician or just an aficionado?
Just the fan, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so after that, I joined the high school jazz band.
Okay.
And I had a drumline instructor that was there, and he pulled me aside one day. He said, "Look, I want to show you something." And he showed me this live video of Chick Corea Acoustic Band, and I was hooked from that point on. And I just, at that point in my life, from the time I was 13 till I graduated high school, I was practicing 2 to 4 hours a day, every day. And just because I enjoyed doing it, and, up until that point, it had been like, okay, I'm going to learn every song on this Rush album, note for note. I'm going to learn every Zeppelin song, note for note. Yes, Fragile, the whole album.
Right.
And then I heard that stuff, and I just kind of shifted. I just wanted to gain. I shifted from like learning a song note for note to like developing my overall technique and bag of tricks, if you will. So I could play anything that would want to flow through me, because that's what I perceived that these musicians, in the Chick Corea Acoustic Band were doing.
Right. These
These guys had enough, they knew their instrument well enough, they had mastered enough to where they had a free flow of ideas. And that shifted my focus to that instead of, I didn't even know that was out there,
right.
A possibility.
Didn't even know it was a thing.
even those Gene Krupa records I heard early on, I didn't realize really what improvisation was.
Sure.
But I think that's what drew me to jazz mostly was the freedom of it.
Were you taking lessons regularly for drums still at this point, or no?
So all of my training on drums came through the school system.
Okay.
I didn't have any private lessons on drum kit until later in life.
Okay.
But I taught myself a lot because I was already a good reader.
Mm-hmm.
I could read any rhythm instantly. So I picked up a lot of different drum books. I was just absorbing as much as I could. Every month I get Modern Drummer. I go through every single educational section of it. They'd have the rock and jazz clinic and then the metal part, and then they had a lot of transcriptions of stuff. So I would learn every single thing in there. So I forgot where we started with that.
That's okay. Yeah. I was just going through the background and figuring out, you had studied in high school
Yeah.
and played in band, and I was just curious if you were taking lessons on the side going through all this. Because
Yeah.
for me, I took lessons. Oh my God, I took lessons for years and years, from electric guitar, then through college for classical guitar.
Sure.
And then at a certain point, I was just like, okay, I'm kind of done with this.
Yeah.
Even after graduate school, I was like, yeah, I don't need to take any more lessons with anybody. I'm kind of,
Yeah.
I'm good with that. I
Yeah.
could figure this out by
Once I
myself.
got in college, I with the applied part and all that stuff, I studied percussion performance in college
Okay.
at East Carolina University.
Okay.
And, you can't, at that time, you couldn't declare a drum set as the principal instrument. You just did percussion. But,
Right.
But I would, one of my applied instructors we did focus on some drum kit here and there, but that wasn't his strong suit
Do
either.
orchestra, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was more,
That's good training, though.
It was great. But at that point, I really could teach myself what I wanted to know on the kit, or what gigs I would pick up. I was proficient enough for that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, not long after I moved to Charlotte, I got the opportunity to study with Jeff Sipe, of the Aquarium Rescue Unit and Jonas Hellborg Trio, and all that stuff. He's a phenomenal drummer. And
I haven't heard of him, but the Johannes Hellborg guy, I know who he is.
Yeah, yeah, he's a phenomenal drummer, phenomenal person. Very, I like his approach to things. So I would think of him as one of my main drum set teachers,
Mm-hmm.
that I've had. But I was already playing at a high level, in my mind when I started working with him.
There's a certain thing to that, though. I mean, I'm laughing because I think a similar thing. I'm like, well, I always say, I joke with other friends who have playing guitar. I'm like, if I'm going to take guitar lessons with somebody, they better be able to open a lot, because I'm not saying I'm a great player, but I know a lot after, school and graduate school and classical and playing in jazz. Like, I know a lot of stuff.
Right.
So, show me some technical stuff I might not be able to do, open some new world to me, because that's not an easy thing to do for somebody who's already got a lot of training to, one, want to go and get humbled.
Right.
And two, to go take lessons with somebody who may not know as much as you do.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. Going to him, I didn't need someone to show me how to read rhythms. I didn't need someone to show me, a flamadiddle or, anything like that.
Right.
I already had all that stuff. I was going to, I think at that level, you're going for conceptual ideas.
Yeah.
One of the things that, really is my biggest focus since I started studying with him was what he's really good at is economy of motion. You watch really good drummers play, like Dennis Chambers, Dave Weckl, Jeff Sipe, these guys.
Yeah.
If you look at them from the waist up, it looks like they're sitting there reading the paper.
Yeah.
It's not like you watch a rock and roll drummer. He's playing a very basic beat, but he's slinging his head all around.
Yeah.
Like he's working really hard. It's not really hard work. It's just show, you know, but you see these other guys that are really playing something, that you have to have that economy of motion or it's not going to work.
That's funny you say that, because I just watched, I didn't just watch it, but a couple of years ago there was a Rush documentary that came out, and during that documentary, did you see it?
Yeah, the Behind the Lighted Stage or something like that.
Yeah, so Neil Peart's talking with his drum teacher who we went to. Who was the drum teacher? Do you remember?
Freddie Gruber.
Yeah, and he talks about the same exact thing about economy of motion and all. I'm moving my hands around to simulate, but the motion that he's doing, he's saying, there's a lot here, but there's nothing going on. Yeah,
that's a really interesting thing, because that makes me think of one of the best warm ups I've ever learned. Jeff Sipe showed me, and it's almost like Tai Chi. You're just doing real slow movements. It's an over exaggerated molar stroke. That's the molar stroke is basically a combination of kind of German grip and French grip, where you're using wrist and fingers, and you're trying to get one continual motion off of the rebound of the stick from striking to rebounding and up. And so it's just, you don't even have to have sticks in your hands. You just make that over exaggerated motion for about 5 minutes, and you feel like you've been playing for 30 minutes, warming up. And that's really kind of a meditative process for me too, when I'm getting ready to play, get in the right headspace and just focus on
getting into
fluid motion. Yeah.
Gosh, it's so interesting that I could talk to you about this, and then just bringing back guitar, there's just certain things. It may not be the same instrument. There are similar principles of ease of motion and relaxation that it doesn't matter. It transcends the instrument.
Absolutely.
And I think that has to go with who you study with. Like, I don't think a traditional rock player, who just pounds the kit might not think about these things, but I think if you maybe do some formal studying with somebody who's very knowledgeable, those are the kind of things that they're going to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you said another important thing is the relaxation. I find most of the time if I'm unable to execute something, I'm too tense. And if I'm too tense, I'm usually holding my breath. I'm not breathing.
Yes.
So, I focus on, again, conceptual ideas like that, breathing, relaxing, even if I'm playing something really intense. And that's one thing I learned for a couple of years on the road with the Afromotive, was an Afrobeat orchestra, 12-piece band. Mm-hmm. And we would play these songs that were sometimes, really fast, don't for like 15, 18 minutes long.
Wow.
So I kind of had to learn that relaxation.
Would you build up? You have to build up your stamina to that kind of stuff?
I did. Yeah. It took me a good 3 months of playing with those guys before I really got a handle of it and really made it through a show without being completely worn out.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the, cause playing drums, I imagine, is more of a workout. I mean, guitar, there's certain thing to working out.
Sure.
Cause for me, I stand most of the time and I'm moving when I play, but nothing like compared to a drummer.
Sure. Yeah. I think I remember reading somewhere you can burn 300 to 400 calories an hour playing drums. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
No wonder you're so skinny. So I'm curious. One of your compadres was on Ron Brundle a while ago.
Oh yeah, I love Ron.
And I was curious, just Ron being a bass player, you being a drummer. One of the questions I asked Ron is, since the drums are not an instrument where you're generally up front, do you prefer being the side person in the supporting role in that sense?
I do. I'm an introvert kind of. I'm a little bit of an extroverted introvert kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I don't really like a lot of attention.
Yeah.
I like to have my music noticed, of course.
Right.
I don't prefer to be. I like my role as a drummer. I like the power and responsibility of it.
Yeah.
There's that old saying, a band's only as good as their drummer.
Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. I'm not trying to sound egotistical with it or anything, but it really is some truth to it. And, I like that role. Yeah.
Well, I will say, having played I was playing my duo partner, John, for a long time, and I still play with him, but, you can notice I'll hit a wrong chord, a wrong note, and I can jazz it up and go to the right thing.
Sure.
And people just won't even notice.
Yeah.
But if the drummer is in the middle of something and they kind of miss a beat, that can throw the rest of the people off in the band.
Yeah. And the audience will feel that too.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And people don't really, you don't get enough credit as a drummer for the things that you holding it down, as it were.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah. The only, I guess, aside to that would be, if I'm doing a jazz is led show or playing my original music, I'm kind of the band leader for that situation. But I'm not really trying to put myself in the spotlight or anything.
Just happens to be that way.
Yeah, I just want the music to be the spotlight and the great players that I get to play with,
Yeah. Well, you brought it up. Let's start talking about it. But I went to your website, man, you've got so much going on.
Yeah.
But as I said at the beginning of the podcast, the first time I got to hear you is through the Jazz is Led. So how did that come about? Because you've got some players in there. As I said, Ron Brundle was on the podcast. Emmanuel Winter was on the podcast.
Yeah.
I've yet to get Troy Khan on. I got to talk to him too. But how did that all come together, and how did you get these players to come together to play?
Sure. Yeah. So let me back up a little bit with that, because this is really kind of Jazz is Led 2.0 here.
Okay.
Back, I believe it was 2009 when I first started the idea, and it was myself, a a phenomenal musician, originally from Charlotte, named Dustin Hofsis.
Mm-hmm.
He's a phenomenal guitar player and phenomenal bass player. He was in the bass player role in the original Jazz Is Led.
Okay.
A guitarist named Jordan Clemens, who's now in New York City. He went up to NYU to study guitar, and that's kind of why the original band had dissipated a little bit.
Okay.
Excuse me. So had those two, and then Tyler Kittle on saxophone. He's now up in Western North Carolina. So all these guys kind of moved to different places.
Okay.
And
how far back does that date?
that was from 2009 to 2011.
Oh, okay. So, wow. All right.
Yeah. So then I got real busy with other stuff, for a long time. And at that time I was doing kind of other one-off projects of my own here and there. I used to do this thing every once in a while called Uncle Curtis's Community Jam Review.
Great.
I would do it at Smokey Joe's every 5 or 6 months and just bring together some of my favorite musicians that I haven't played with a whole lot. Mm-hmm. And we would just do about half of it, just complete improv. And then the other half would be like some fusion classics.
Okay.
So at that time I was kind of I wasn't even really thinking of Jazz Is Led as a long-term thing. It was just kind of a fun project to do then. So I kind of left on the back burner for a while, and then this was January of 2020. I'd already had the idea of kind of reworking it,
Okay.
I'd started, Manuel had joined my main working band, 20 Ride, and I really liked his playing. I've been friend with Ron for years and years, and I was in a trio with him and Jordan Clemens, the original Jazz Led guitarist of Jordan's original fusion stuff. And I've known Troy for probably 25 years too, and played with him in a lot of different projects as well, and just always highly admired him as a person and a player. Mm-hmm. And so I just was like, all right, I'm gonna get the band back together. So I just called these guys. I went to see Troy play with O.C. Davis up at Crown Station one night. They were doing a Monday night thing, I think, and my now wife, and I went up there and I was like, hey man, so here's my idea. What you think? He's like, yeah, I'd love to do it. And then I talked to Ron, talked to Emmanuel. They were all down for it. And then the pandemic hit. So I had some old demo recordings that we had done on the original Jazz Is Led. So I sent those to the guys.
Just out of curiosity, I don't mean to interrupt you, but how did the idea percolate to do Zeppelin?
Yeah.
For the main reason that I would think, and maybe it's been done before and I don't even know, I should say, I know it's been done, people doing Beatles stuff, because it's very melodic. The melodies are there. How did the idea to come to do Zeppelin?
Well, if we really get down to it, John Bonham was kind of my first drum teacher.
Yeah.
And when I discovered some live Zeppelin stuff, I realized this was around the same time that I was discovering jazz. I realized that in their live shows, they had a lot of improv going on. They didn't really play it the same way twice. So I liked that because I was just getting into the jazz and improv. I found out, that one of his favorite drummers was Buddy Rich. If you, listen to a John Bonham solo, you'll see some stuff he's trying to steal from Buddy Rich.
Right.
Might not play it as fast and as clean, but, he makes it his own thing.
Yeah. Well, Buddy Rich is,
yeah.
I mean, as far as I know, as a not a professional drummer, but like he's the greatest, if not one of the greats.
Yeah,
top 5 maybe.
Yeah, he's a technical master. Yeah. He's definitely one of the best that ever lived. And then so I kind of had that idea, like it'd be cool to do these instrumental, and this was probably like not long out of college. I thought about it, and then not long after that, there's a band called Jazz Is Dead came out.
Yeah.
It was Billy Cobham had started it.
Okay.
Billy Cobham, Alfonso Johnson, they played with Weather Report on bass. Mm-hmm. T. Lavitz from the Dixie Dregs on keys, and Jimmy Herring on guitar.
Gotcha. And
they were doing instrumental jazz fusion Grateful Dead.
Interesting.
Jazz Is Dead. And that's, so I kind of stole the name a little bit from them, but not really. I kind of already had the idea. So Jazz Is Dead, Jazz Is Led, kind of, and I like there's kind of, it could be a dual meaning there, like led, like is being led somewhere. Or, not just Led Zeppelin.
Sure.
Cause I mean, it's, and then it just, it blossomed, at the time I played with, Jordan and Dustin and Tyler, because they were the guys that, I really respected at the time. They were friends of mine.
Mm-hmm.
They were, local, and we all wanted to do it. So, from the start, a lot of the arrangements I had the ideas for, and then everybody kind of contributed a little bit as well.
Okay.
So we would get together, and at the time I had a teaching studio in Matthews called Music Matters, and we had a little a band room in the back, and we would get back there and rehearse, and we recorded a demo there too, and all that stuff. And we played, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 shows, and that's about it.
So when you guys did the originally, well, I shouldn't say originally, this version of the group got together to do stuff. You had the arrangements. What was your part in the arranging? Did you start writing stuff out that you wanted to do, or did you say, okay, we're going to take this section and then we're going to morph it into this part, the main riff, and that kind of thing?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of it, I didn't really write anything out for any of this, but I had, the able-bodied musicians with Ron and Troy and Emmanuel. They're just phenomenal. So I would be like, all right, so for an example, immigrant song, we're doing like a samba kind of thing, It kind of lends itself to that. You got dun 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 dun. Kind of already has that samba rhythm to it if you just change the drums a little bit. So I would sing the part to them. Be like, hey, try something like this. And then Ron might be like, excuse me. Ron might be like, well, what if I try, a songo bass line in the chorus instead? Like, oh yeah, that works, and sometimes the ideas just start flowing that way.
Yeah. You don't know what's going to fit sometimes. You start playing and man, you're like, what? This fits here. That fits there. I didn't know this song would lend itself to this.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. It's, I think that's a really important thing is to, as a band leader, I guess I call myself leaders because I formed the band as my idea, and I kind of have the initial ideas for the arrangements, but you have to employ the musicians that you really are inspired by, because they're going to take those ideas and they're going to make them something greater than you can really have ever imagined.
Sure.
Or at least that's been my experience. I kind of have an idea of how I want it to sound in my head, but that's never going to happen unless it's me playing every instrument and I'm completely technically proficient on every single one of them.
Sure.
So, when these musicians that I really like their sound, and respect them, and they're very technically proficient, they start adding their own personalities into it. It just takes on a life of its own. Yeah.
Well, I mean, with jazz, you've got that structure.
Absolutely.
The basic outline, the head, as you were of the tune. But then, I mean, boom. It's open season to go and take your own thing and do it. I mean, at least that's my interpretation of what jazz should be like.
Sure.
Doing that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How'd you get into composition? When did you start writing your own stuff?
Oh man. Probably in college was, I think I might have, it was in college that when I wrote the first song that I wrote. I don't even remember it right offhand, but I can kind of remember doing it. Was for we're kind of a grungy type band that I was in. We never ended up playing it because I was like, it's like, hey guys, I wrote a song. It's like, go back and play the drums. But it was really college, and when I had some composition classes in college, that I learned how to take some of these. I always would kind of have melodies in my head throughout any given day, just kind of just pops up.
Yeah.
And then once I had a composition class, and it was kind of like voice leading stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's usually the classical style.
Yes. Yeah, it was. It totally was. And, it kind of turned on the lights for me a little bit, because I was like, okay, I know how to take this melody and put a chord structure behind it.
Right.
So, one of the oldest tunes I have started that way as just, a college composition project that I had to do.
Right.
And since then it's taken on probably about 15 different incarnations as far as the harmonic structure. The melody has stayed the same. But yeah, I guess it was really college when I started getting into that. It was.
When did you start getting into the jazz stuff, writing jazz stuff? Was that in college too?
Yeah, because so I took that original melody and then I turned it into a jazz tune after I had done the composition class part of it,
right?
Because that's where my heart's been.
Right.
Yeah.
And is that tough writing just the melody, that the head, that you want people to grasp onto?
It's not for me. I feel like I could just sit here and come up with melodies all day long.
Right.
The hard part for me is finding a harmonic structure that I like the next day. I might like it right now. Be, oh yeah, that sounds cool.
Right.
Listen to the next day, like, that's, that movement's not quite right. There, so.
Is that something that you would get some of the other musicians that you work with to come up with? Where you come up to melody and you go, here guys, what do you think?
Oh, I've done a little bit of both. I try to have an idea of the harmonic structure first.
Yeah.
I usually start with the melody first. I'll toy around with the harmonic structure of it. I've had a couple instances where I can't find what I'm hearing in my head.
Yeah.
There's one tune, for instance, about the Jordan Clemens that I'd referenced, his guitarist. So I took it to him. I was like, hey man, I need some help with this. So I was like, take this melody. I just want to see what you'll do with it, harmonically. And he came up with a whole different approach I would have never thought of for it. And so,
did you like it?
I did. I like the key of it. I liked most of it, and then I liked parts of what I already had. But the part that I liked most about his was the part I was missing. So it's like that particular tune is just a kind of a combination of my harmonic input and his harmonic
right.
input. So yeah,
it's always interesting when you have somebody else do some stuff with you. It's either something you're like, okay, I'm going to relinquish this, to you,
right,
to put your input on, and you're either going to like it or you're not, you know. And part of not liking it, I think, is somebody else doing it and you not doing it,
right.
That's not easy for people,
right.
And people might not realize when you're writing music, like there's a bit of control that you need to be able to secede to somebody else.
Absolutely, yeah. I had that. Fortunately, a lot of the musicians I work with, I've had that where they tell me, like, if I'm not getting what you want, just tell me. I got thick skin. You're not going to hurt my feelings or anything. And I tell other people the same thing when I'm doing a studio session. I'm like, look, if I'm not instinctually getting what you're going for, you run into different things where people will tell you exactly what they want. You got some guys that they don't really know what they want. They can kind of give you a general idea. So
right. I'm
like, if you're looking for something different, feel free to tell me. I got thick skin. I'm not going to get upset, but I think, if unless you're like paying like top-notch studio musicians, top-notch studio time,
right,
you're going to have to expect to have their personalities interjected into it,
Yeah, I think that's a thing too. Cause I mean, when I put out my EP, I got a whole bunch of friends and people I know to come play on it. And they'd always ask me the same thing. What are you looking for? And I'd be like, let's say for Greasy Keys, Jason Atkins came in and he played on one of my tunes. He's like, what are you looking for? I was like, I'm kind of thinking of Allman Brothers vibe. And he's like, right up my alley, man.
Yeah.
Let me do this. And I was like, yeah, okay. And he's like, well, let me get this. I'm going to add this organ part. I was like, oh, no.
Right. Yeah.
But I think drums, that's almost, I don't want to say completely out of my foray, but it's something like, I know if I hear it, I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
But if I don't, I can't sit there and go, I need more of a Billy Cobham deal, and rather than, I need less John Bonham, more Billy Cobham, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of a tough thing.
Yeah, it is. And in that line, I respect a musician if I'm doing a session with him that can like beatbox a groove for me. It's like, I'm hearing like a boom, like, okay, cool. Like that's always helpful.
Yeah.
Any of the other metaphors they could use, make it sound more swampy.
And that's what, the funny thing, I laugh, but that's what musicians do.
Absolutely.
Can you do this? Can you make it more like a waterfall?
Right.
A little smoother.
Yeah.
Lighter touch.
Need it a little more purple.
Yeah. That's great.
Right.
So what's the songwriting process like for you, Curtis? Do you sit down with the piano? You said you get, melodies throughout the day, something will hit you, but are you generally trying to sit down and write?
It depends. I'm more of a go with the inspiration kind of writing.
Yeah.
Most of them I've written on piano. There's been some that have started on the guitar, some that have started on the bass. That's funny you said that, because I do want to try to start doing that. I've decided I'm going to try to set myself office hours for writing.
Right.
I want to try this.
I think that's a good thing. Steve,
yeah.
I talked to Steve Stokel a long time ago. You know who Steve?
Yeah.
Steve, and he was like, you need to kind of try to write a little bit every day, man, and do it, because otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's a muscle you have to exercise like anything else, I think. But I've always been more like, I'll get this melody in my head, and if I really like it, it'll stick there. Sometimes I'll sing it into my phone.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've had a lot that I've just lost. My memory's not what it used to be. So I'll take that, and next time I'm near a piano, I'll try to work it out.
Right.
So I would like to make a shift, though. I want to try my hand at, because like I said, I'll have these melodies pop up in my head random times throughout the day. I want to see if I can just sit down and channel it.
Right. And you have we were talking earlier, but you have a home recording studio?
I do.
Do you try to lay down some demos before you actually go into a studio, or do you try to get everything recorded? Do you try to record at home and do everything?
I haven't done any recording for releases from home for my own stuff. I have done some satellite drum tracks for other people.
Okay.
Like for the Lawn Friends project that Colby Dobbs and Mike Ramsey did, various other things. But mainly my recording right now is for demos for any of my original stuff. And then I'm also starting to get into composing for possible sync placements for cell phone ads and that kind of thing.
That's a tough racket.
Yeah. Most of it's that. So yeah, I will try for my original stuff. I'll try to get a demo with all the parts, rough at least, you have
your drum kit all mic'd up to your DAW?
I do. I've got an 8-channel interface into Logic Pro 10 on a MacBook Pro, and it's just, I could just sit up. It's set up so I could just hit the spacebar and record anytime I want.
That's great.
Yep. So like some of the recent stuff I did with Charlie Hunter, I was in a situation where I had to come up some tunes pretty quick. That's a whole nother story we can get to. So yeah, in about the span of about one of the tunes, in the span of about 30 minutes, I went up to my studio, recorded wrote the song, had the melody, got the chords down, recorded the drum track, recorded the bass track, recorded the keyboard track, and mixed it down and sent it to him in about a 30-minute time period.
Wow.
So that was one of those moments where the inspiration hit and I had access to my studio and a goal in mind all at the same time.
That's great.
Yeah. So it doesn't always work that way, but
no, but it's just an amazing part of our existence as musicians today, having come up where, you only had a 4-track or this or that.
Right.
Now, man, I mean, I don't know too many musicians who don't have a home studio to at least lay down a demo or ideas in some simplistic manner.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's a big step up from the old Tascam 4-track cassette recorders and all that.
And it's also a double-edged sword because, and I want to talk to you more about these kind of things later, but all the things that you do as a musician to make a living or to make the music happen, it's not even just playing your instrument anymore, writing.
Right.
You've got to learn how to use that DAW. You've got to do social media. You've got to do this. You've got to book the gig. You're not doing all this. You're doing all this stuff on your own. Right. Which takes away from what you would love to do, is just create or practice.
Right. Yeah. This, one of the things that makes me think of as an analogy is like, you can't see me because we're on a podcast, but I'm holding my fingers real close together. Like you got music and then business is the bigger part, wide open.
Yeah. It's crazy, but I want to get into that later. But what I want to do, since we've been talking about songwriting, you sent me over a couple of tracks, and I'm going to butcher the first one. We talked about it earlier, but Adama. What's the actual pronunciation?
Yeah, Adama.
Adama. All right, so Curtis and I were talking beforehand, and I said, I'm such a geek that the first thing I thought about was Battlestar Galactica, because the captain was Captain Adama.
Yeah. Pete Lentz said the same thing too. Yeah.
And Pete's another geek. He won't mind me calling him that because we had a Star Wars discussion on the podcast.
Right.
So tell me about this tune, man.
So this tune started. I played with Afromotive from about 2007 to 2009. It was a 12-piece Afrobeat orchestra, and two of the guys were from Cote d'Ivoire, West Africa. One of them was named Adama Dembele. So the song is named after him. He's a 33rd generation djembe player from Cote d'Ivoire. And, so yeah, that goes back like 600 years or something.
God, yeah.
And he's got a bunch of brothers that all play as well and a bunch of sisters that are all dancers.
And just a monstrous player, I guess.
Incredible player. And he was very generous with his knowledge to me as a drummer. He really, playing in that band, it took me a good 3 months to get used to it because it almost feels like playing backwards a little bit. It's like playing James Brown, Tower of Power funk backwards in a way. So his direction really changed my approach a lot and opened up a lot of possibilities rhythmically for me. So this tune started. The main melody of the tune started as an idea to write for a full Afrobeat orchestra. Mm-hmm. And I never really finished it. So it had been sitting around for a long time, and then I got the opportunity to record with one of my favorite musicians in the world, Charlie Hunter, the pioneer of the hybrid guitar, playing the bass and the guitar on the same neck. Phenomenal musician. And I had a discussion with him. I'd send him some music. He'd agreed to record with me, and when I sent him some music, he kind of put me in my place a little bit on that. He said, it's too heady, fusiony, New York, that nobody's really going to want to listen to it unless you're really a music geek.
Right.
And he was suggesting I play the people's music, get something a little more digestible by more people, which I'm fine with. I'm not trying to.
You're a musician. You should be able to take criticism.
Absolutely. And this is someone I respect as well, So, this was about 2 weeks before our session was going to happen. I kind of already had sent him his tunes and he was basically rejecting them. So I was like, okay, I got to take this back to the drawing board. So I pulled out this tune. I was like, wait a minute. Okay. I could still do the kind of Afrobeat feel to it, more like an Afropop thing. Cause you got some of the important elements there, mainly like the guitar tenor lines, kind of like James Brown has, and placement of the bass line. So I reworked the tune, added a different melody idea from another song I was working on, and kind of combined them. And I recorded a demo of it, just put the basic parts and sent it to him. He said, "Sounds great, let's do it."
Okay.
So yeah. And he was able to, it's really cool watching him do what he does, cause he's playing that tenor line with his fingers and playing the bass line at the same time. And he just, I told him what I was going for, cause I didn't have that on the demo, but I told him I'm going for like, an Afrobeat, Afropop kind of vibe to the bass and the guitar. And he started playing it, and it was just like he pulled it out of my head,
Wow.
Yeah. It was really, really magical. Yeah.
All right. So what? Pronounce the name again, because it just keeps escaping me every time you say it.
Adama.
Was this off a particular recording that you have? Your newest recording?
This is my part of. I did 3 singles with Charlie.
Okay.
On these sessions, and Emmanuel Winter on violin.
Did you package them together as an EP, or you just totally
total as singles? I'm trying it out. I've heard these days, with the streaming, that's a better model. You put out a single every so often, and it just keeps people engaged.
Right.
If you're doing it on a regular basis. So I just figured I'd give it a shot that way, because I didn't have a full album's worth of material.
Right.
And it was 3 songs that we had time to do. So.
Was there a title to this group that you released it under, or no? Just under Curtis Wingfield?
Just under Curtis Wingfield, featuring Charlie Hunter and Emmanuel Winter.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's take a listen to Adama.
Sounds good.
By Curtis Wingfield. Curtis, I love the tune, man.
Oh, thanks, man.
I heard it, and as soon as I heard the violin, I thought it was Emmanuel Winter on there. So I had to ask you, and you did confirm it.
Yeah, he has a very distinct sound. And,
Yes.
And he really has a way of kind of lighting a fire on anything he's on, you know.
He really does, man.
Yeah.
He played on my EP as well.
Oh, great.
And so there's a track, and it's going, and I like it. And then the violin part he added, I was just like, oh my gosh, it just lit up the track.
Yeah. He's really a dynamic player with a very unique sound.
Yes.
And someone approached the violin the way he does. I mean, you know, you've heard other electric violinists in the past.
Yeah.
Jerry Goodman with Mahavishnu and Jean-Luc Ponty and those guys. But he still, I mean, Emmanuel's like all that plus like Jimi Hendrix on the violin. Like it's really, I really enjoy it.
And you know what's wonderful for him is he's a young guy. So, he's always learning and getting better. I think by the time he gets to be my age, which I'm 52.
Yeah.
He's just going to be monstrous.
Absolutely.
I think he's just going to be a monstrous player. I mean, he's already fantastic, but I mean,
absolutely.
just incredible.
Yeah. I've known him for, I guess, about 4 years now, and I've already heard that happening, you know, and, phenomenal musician, great guy. Laid back, you know. It's funny because he's one of the most laid back people I've ever met in my life, and then you get him on that violin, and it's just fire.
Yeah, it's like what? Where did that come from?
Yeah, right.
So, Curtis, you brought another tune over to me, "Blues for Chantilly."
Correct.
Can you fill me in about this song?
Sure. So again, this is another one with the sessions with Emmanuel and Charlie Hunter, and we were. I think I was about 4 or 5 days away from the session at this point. I had 2 songs that I'd sent. The second round of songs I sent him after he rejected the first round. I was like, I need one more tune. You know, I wanted to try to get 3 done. I had I think a 6-hour block at Old House Studio. And so my wife and I, she was my fiance at the time, or we were just dating at the time. We were sitting on the front porch of our house. We were just having some morning coffee, and I was like, I got to come up with one more tune. I was like, I don't know what to do. And we lived in the Chantilly neighborhood near Plaza Midwood. And we're just sitting there kind of watching everything happen. You know, at that time in the neighborhood, it's just construction trucks everywhere, dogs and strollers, and we're just watching the activity of the neighborhood and be like, and then this melody came to me. I was like, hold on, I need to go upstairs. And that's the tune I was telling you about. I went upstairs in my studio, wrote the melody, wrote the chords, recorded the whole demo, you know, bass, drums, and keys on the demo, and then emailed it to Charlie. And so, I got one more for you. What do you think? You know, I think it was later that day. He said, "Sounds good."
Oh, okay, all right, good, man.
So I had, so I called it Blues for Chantilly. Because we were contemplating moving out of the neighborhood. It was just gotten too busy for us.
Right.
You know, so, we were kind of like, all this noise everywhere. We're just trying to have coffee on the porch, you know, so and then that song came to me. I went upstairs, wrote it, recorded it. And,
all the same players.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
Well, let's take a listen. Oh, excuse me. Let's take a listen to Blues for Chantilly.
All right.
Curtis, man, just another fantastic track.
Thank you.
So when you recorded this, we were talking earlier, you recorded all these tracks at Old House Studio.
Correct.
And this was with Chris Gargis before he passed away?
Absolutely.
Oh, man. Are you still recording at Old House with the new fellow who took over? I haven't been down there yet.
I did my first session a couple weeks ago there
Okay.
with Daniel Hodges. Yeah, he's phenomenal engineer, great dude. It was really good to be back in there. I've spent a lot of time at Old House Studio and even the original location in the actual Old House.
Okay.
With Chris Gargis, and Chris was one of the guys really responsible for getting me in the music scene when I moved here. He gave me a lot of referrals for gigs and all that kind of stuff. He recorded my first band in Charlotte, first original band, Bellyful. We recorded with him at Studio East,
Okay.
which isn't there anymore. So yeah, Old House just has always felt like home to me. I've done a lot of projects there for myself and for other people. So being back in there felt great. Daniel has made some good changes to the place, layout wise,
Right.
Equipment wise, I think he's really kind of carrying the torch out there, and the vibe is just as good as it was. That's what I've always loved about Old House.
Nice.
Has a relaxed vibe to it,
Well, it's nice that the tradition is carrying on. It's, because it's like a Charlotte institution, Old House Studio at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And rightly so, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's certain things that change a lot, especially in Charlotte. We're always looking for the new and the latest thing that happens. And it's nice that we have these staple things in town that are still there.
Absolutely.
Whether it's an old restaurant or a recording studio that has that name and carries on a tradition.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got so much stuff going on with yourself. We talked about Jazz is Led. We talked about recording your own stuff, but you have other groups that you're playing with. And like if you go to Curtis's website, curtiswingfieldmusic.com,
right.
You'll see like he's got a ton of stuff going on.
Right.
So what are some of the other projects that you're involved in?
So I think you kind of have to do that to make a living. To be a blue collar musician these days, making a living, you kind of got to have a lot of irons in the fire. So I'm in my main band that pays my bills and stuff. We're two bands in one. One's 20 Ride. It's a Zach Brown band tribute act. Mm-hmm. And we have the same guys, but a different name, Southside Station. More variety stuff. Most of that stuff is like high-end weddings and corporate events, that kind of thing that can actually pay your bills.
Right.
Then there's other musicians that I've played with on and off for years and years. Josh Daniel, is a good buddy of mine, and I gig with him when I can. We do the Levon Helm tribute thing at Visualite every year. I've got Jazz is Led. It's probably what my main focus is right now for my own stuff. And I've got my original stuff, but I don't really play that out live too much.
Right.
Right, it's a lot. I could play with 3 or 4 different bands on a given week.
Yeah.
Just depending on what week you would catch me on. It used to be more that way too, but I can't even think of the projects now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about it because it's like somebody asks you about something. It's like, oh my gosh, on the spur of the moment. But what I'm curious about is with all the groups that you're doing, and of course your original music and Jazz is Led stuff. What's a jazz scene like? Like knowing gigging classic rock stuff that I do, like I can keep a pretty busy schedule.
Right.
But is the jazz stuff a little tougher to keep going in the schedule?
Yeah, it is for me. I mean, the majority of my schedule gets filled up with 20 Ride and Southside Station.
Yeah.
So the other jazz gigs I can get are kind of the cream for me, I guess, that are just for the fun of it. I mean, of course they're paying gigs too, but from what I can see, I mean, like, you got places now like Middle C Jazz, like you were saying, that's a great venue for jazz. As far as, you got festivals and that kind of thing happening. I think that's a good outlet for jazz. So I'm still, I'm trying to explore that more, get Jazz is Led out there more.
Right.
So I remember, back when I first moved to Charlotte, it seemed like there was a lot more jazz happening in town in like late 90s, early 2000s.
Right.
You could play a jazz gig 6-7 nights a week, different restaurants and stuff. I mean, a lot of it, your background music, but you still get to play jazz, which is cool.
I always think jazz is great for more high-end stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Or it might even be good. I mean, some of the breweries, I guess if you contact them and do that, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, most of the stuff they're having is a lot of classic rock kind of thing.
Well, that's kind of what happened is a lot of these jazz gigs that used to be here, you had the economy tanked at the end of 2007, 2008 with the housing crisis and all that stuff. A lot of these jazz gigs went away. And then when they came back as classic rock cover gigs, or acoustic single, solo acoustic gigs.
I'm always surprised because there are one or two places that I play, and I'm like going into these higher end restaurants to play, and I'm like, why am I here?
Right.
Like it just seems more like you should have a jazz guitar player or a pianist in the corner, but they want what I do, and I'm like, okay,
right.
Yeah. They're like, oh no, we've gotten good feedback, and I'm like, all right, fine. You
got to give the people what they want.
Yeah. And that may be just because doing the classic rock stuff, from doing the Zach Brown tribute, is that it's nostalgia. So people want to hear stuff that they recognize and they love. And even over a nice steak dinner, they're singing along.
Absolutely.
Which cracks me up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're not getting any younger, so the people who grew up with this stuff, they're getting a little older, and that's what they want to hear. They might not be familiar hearing all blues or kind of blue, some Miles Davis stuff.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think, and it's kind of sad that jazz has become more of a niche market, in the United States, and it's really the only truly American art form,
Yeah.
But I would like to, there are people out there doing it though, and they're, again, like Middle C and other venues that are trying to keep it alive. And I think, and then you got, the Jazz Arts, Charlotte Jazz Arts,
yes.
Lonnie and O.C. Davis, what they're doing is fantastic with
I got to get them on the podcast. I keep saying, writing down notes of people I got to get on in the future.
Yeah. I think they're doing wonderful work. And their education program too, they teaching young musicians jazz and all that. It's really, really great to see that. How
do you like playing in a tribute band? Because I mean, that's the newest in the last few years. That's the thing. You know, all these tribute pop bands popping up. From we were talking about Chad Andrew Harris doing the Rage Against the Machine, and you've got Josh Daniel doing all his Grateful Dead type of stuff. How do you find the tribute circuit, as it were?
Well, I mean, it is what it is. I love it. I'm glad it's there. It gives me good paying gigs. With mine specifically, with the Zach Brown band, I didn't know who they were when I joined this band. And when I started, I'd only heard the couple hits they had, and really their deeper catalog isn't really representative of that.
Right.
And there's some good songs in there, and they're great musicians. So I feel good about being in that band. It leaves, you always have to kind of walk that line as a working musician. It's like, what can I pay my bills with, and then what can I be creative with, So for me, being in a tribute band works for me because I do have these other creative outlets,
right?
I think I hear some musicians kind of snobbishly putting down tribute bands sometimes, and I just don't understand that approach, why any musician would put down any other musician for doing anything.
Right.
We're all just in it trying to make a living.
Hey, I've known and met people like doing solo acoustic stuff, or even playing in the duos that I do. People say, I don't play that song, or I don't play this song. I'm not going to play Margarita. I don't play Brown Eyed Girl. I'm not doing that.
Right.
I'm going to play this, and I'm like, well, maybe that's why I keep getting called back all the time, because whenever I play Brown Eyed Girl, people are singing along, if not some of the women getting up and dancing.
That's
because
right.
they love hearing it.
That's right.
Now, you might be bored of it as a player, having played it a million times or heard it as a musician.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that somebody else who's listening is going to be bored of it.
That's true. And that's, that when I came to that realization as a professional musician is when I really felt just better about my job in general. It's like, I'm not here for me.
Yeah.
you know, I became a professional musician because I want to make people feel the way I felt when I heard live music.
Yeah.
It really uplifted me. You know, I just remember as a kid, the first live band I saw, and I don't even remember the name. It was some cover band at Little Town Festival in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. You know, it's like, but I just remember just being completely mesmerized. I had no idea what was happening. And then every instance from then on, every time I'd see live music, I just feel amazing. So I became a musician because I want to make other people feel that way.
Right.
At least that's one of the reasons, one of the main reasons I became a musician. I want to share that joy. And I feel like that's, you know, I've always had a natural gift for it. So why not share that?
Yeah.
And you know, tribute bands are a good way you can do that, you know, and like you said, playing cover tunes. So it's, you know, if I'm getting on stage in front of, any audience that, you know, wants to hear that kind of stuff, and I'm just self-absorbed in my heady fusion,
Sure.
you know, that's not going to get me anywhere. There's a time and a place for it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think there's, a lot of people don't realize it as much. Musicians learn it, that there's different levels to all these things in these different fields.
Yeah.
And you could even take it into sports if you want to, but you know, not every musician is a world famous musician. I mean, I think we idolize people who are the top of the heap, who made millions of dollars and are stars, but people don't realize there's tons of everyday musicians doing everyday things, you know? Hey, this guy who plays in the hotel on that piano on Sunday mornings, that's one of his gigs, to make the music, the hotel sound warm and inviting.
Absolutely.
On a Sunday morning, and people don't get that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I call them, you know, we got the white collar musicians. Those are the stars, the famous people out there making millions, whatever. Then we got us blue collar musicians. We're out here doing all the gigs that we can. And for me, you know, again, like once I figured out, like I'm playing the music for the people, like it changed everything, you know, as far as how I feel about that kind of stuff, you know.
Did you ever see the movie Hired Gun?
Yeah, I did see that.
It's such an enlightening movie because you have all these musicians who have played with these big stars, but they're not the stars.
Right.
You know, the musicians who are on stage with these folks are not.
Right.
Taylor Swift is the star. Everybody else who's in that band is probably a killer musician.
Right.
But nobody knows who they are.
That's right.
You know, and that's part of the gig. And once Taylor Swift, let's say she finishes a tour, she may keep those people. She might decide on a new set of people. Those guys got to find a new gig.
Right. Right. They're just trying to get a gig like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, their gig may pay more than, you know, the local brewery.
Right.
But at the end of the day, who knows? Maybe it doesn't, you know, because.
Well, I mean, like as far as like the weddings and corporate parties, I know a lot of the guys, I've met some people that have played with some of those high level artists with Prince or CeeLo Green. I know some musicians play with those cats. They don't make any more than I make on a wedding gig or a corporate gig, you know, which is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, again, it's all music for the people.
It's being a musician is really interesting in that facet. And I also don't think that a lot of people, because like I said, a lot of the regular folks consider success having made it and being a big star, making millions of dollars and touring the world.
Right.
I think that's what most people do it. But in my world, I think being a success is that you're doing what you love and you're making a living doing it.
Right. I agree.
You know, it's going out and doing that gig and playing and being able to perform every weekend and to be able to support a mortgage or an apartment,
right? You
know, car payments, kids, if you happen to have them.
Yeah.
I mean, and doing what you love and doing music, that's a success.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 1,000,000% with that. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's you know, it's only probably less than 1% of musicians out there making their living are doing it on that white collar level, you know, like
oh my gosh, yes.
Or with one band, you know, the rest are, you know, we're juggling lots of different projects, you know, lots of different types of gigs, you know, different styles of music, studio sessions, sync placement stuff, anything you could do as a producer or a writer or a studio musician.
And that's an interesting thing about today is that I don't know, you know, I didn't grow up in the 60s or, you know, the 50s, but I think there's as bad as the music industry is with recording and Spotify and, you know, residuals from album sales today.
Right.
I think it is better for the general working musician.
Right.
Because you can get your music out. There are things like sync licensing or soundtrack writing and those kind of things that feel like it's more open to us today than it might have been 25, 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
And with the advent of technology of recording studios where, you have a recording studio at home. I've got a recording studio at home. The gear we've got in a computer, would be $1 million studio back in the day.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, that's right. I agree with you. The way the technology is, you can be totally self-contained.
Yeah.
And now, with the digital distribution, it's kind of a double-edged sword with Spotify and the like. Like you said, you're getting fractions of a penny per stream, But again, at the same time, you're given this platform where you can reach people all over the world.
Sure.
When I put this stuff out, I was really surprised to see that, I was heard in 190 different countries by like 50,000 different people.
Yeah.
That was, I wouldn't have been able to do that on my own with mechanical distribution. It would be impossible. It would cost millions of dollars probably to do that. I don't even know. Like, how do I even get a CD to 190 different countries in stores,
Yep.
So the digital thing, it has its ups and downs. And
I was going to ask you about that because I noticed a lot of my musician friends from Facebook started posting their Spotify numbers.
Yeah.
For this year. Cause, Spotify, they give you a thing and it says you were heard in this many countries, you had this many streams and such and such. I'm not even going to embarrass myself and tell you what mine was, but I looked at some of my musician friends. I'm like, how the heck did you get that many listens and that many? Did you do marketing for that? What did you do?
Well, mine came from the fact that I had Charlie Hunter as a featured musician on my tunes. I'm pretty sure because he's got, I think he's got like probably 150,000 Instagram followers.
Gotcha.
He's got 500,000 monthly Spotify listeners. So when somebody's a featured artist, Spotify every Friday puts out the, I forget what they call it. It's a playlist that is based on algorithms on what you already listen to and the artists that you already like. So if there's an artist out there or a listener out there that already follows Charlie Hunter or Emmanuel Winter, because he's a featured artist as well,
right,
that'll show up on their weekly, discovery playlist or whatever they call it.
Gotcha.
But then in turn, they follow. A lot of those have followed me. So anything else I put out from that point on, will be presented in front of them.
So it was like, just out of curiosity, was the Jazz is Lead, was that put out under your stuff too? Or does that have a separate thing?
That's a separate entity. I've got the band name is Jazz is Lead, and then I've got featuring Curtis Wingfield, Emmanuel Winter, Ron Brindle, Troy Kahn. So that's just so it can kind of work the algorithm. Sure. Like link to each of their Spotify's and show it to their audience.
And there's a thing you've got to listen to.
Okay.
I mean, you've got to do, man, we was talking before, this is another thing that you have to think about as a creative. You have to think about the algorithms. Well, I've got to make sure that I've got this person's name in there and it's Led Zeppelin and I'm going to pick up this and I'm going to pick up this person's followers and it's, oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's really daunting. I'm still trying to get a handle on all that stuff. I don't come from, the digital generation,
Right.
I'll be 49 soon, and
heck, man, you're still younger than me, so you should be in on
it. I'm 49, going on 18. Is what I like to say. Just getting started,
So that begs the question: how are you with social media? What kind of stuff are you doing with social media?
Not as much as I should be, probably.
That seems to be everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand the importance of it, and I that is something I could definitely get better at.
Right.
It's always, I have mixed emotions on it. I think it's a great tool, and I've said many times I wish that they had that back when I had my original band Bellyful. We probably would have done a lot better.
Right.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. And at the same time, it's just like, like you're saying, it's just something else you got to do and educate yourself on, when I'd rather be focusing on the music.
Right.
So I've thought about having someone do it for me. My wife has offered to do that as well. She's incredibly supportive, and that's great. But I think the social media, it's something that I haven't fully grasped yet, as far as how to use it to its full potential.
Right. I think everybody's still trying to figure that out to a certain sense, because I see some friends who are really good at it, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know if it translates. Like, you could put out a great Instagram post,
right,
or a TikTok video. Does it really translate into people buying your stuff?
Right.
Showing up to a show?
Right.
And I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
I haven't seen proof of it for my own stuff, because
Yeah.
I have done some of that, when Jazz has led shows or any other shows I've promoted. I've even done paid social media ads and all that kind of thing. And I think part of the trick is because they changed the rules a lot. They think they changed the algorithms a lot. As soon as you get a handle on the way you think it is, it changes. Which, I'm with you on that. I haven't seen the proof on my level. Now, for a bigger artist, maybe it is making a difference, or somebody who works it from more angles, maybe. But I don't doubt the power of it. I'm pretty sure there's folks out there who have greatly furthered their career using social media. I haven't figured it out yet.
I think that it helps a bit. Like, there are some things it kind of cracks me up when little things happen to me. So I was at work a couple of years ago, and I was playing a lot, and my friend, one of my coworkers, comes over to me and she says, "Hey, I got a question for you." And I'm like, "Yeah, what?" She's like, "Are you famous?" And I laughed, and I was like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Are you famous?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Well, I was looking at Charlotte on the cheap. I was looking for stuff to do this weekend, and your name came up a couple of times that you were playing at all these places." And I just laughed, and I was like, "Well, I wish I was, but that's just social media advertising, because then you've got a place like Charlotte on the cheap figures out you're playing these places, so it does work in certain aspects, to get your name out there in little places that you might not be thinking about."
Right.
And I played a couple of shows, and I'm sure you have too. Where somebody said, "Oh man, I came across such and such on social media that you were playing this weekend. So we were looking for something to do, and we wanted to come out and hear some music."
Oh, good.
So
yeah, I guess I have had some of that stuff happen too, here and there.
But it's not, it's not the mass effect that we'd like, where like 300 people storm the brewery just to hear us play tonight, because,
yeah,
because you never know, because being in a city like Charlotte, there's a million things going on. How many times have you played a gig somewhere and it's not packed on a Friday like it normally is because there's a football game going on uptown?
Right.
You know, or there's a festival or something else happening.
Right.
So you just never know in the city atmosphere.
Of course. Yeah.
So, Curtis, what else do you have coming up, man? You got some other things going on that we can talk about? Got some shows?
Yeah. There's going to be a good show coming up at the Visualite on February 8th. It's going to be a benefit for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and the theme is fusion and prog. So right up my alley. Jazz's Led will be doing a 20-minute set there. And
all local guys?
Yeah, it's going to be all local guys. This is still in the planning stages, so I hope I'm not overstepping here. But from what I understand, there's going to be maybe 5 or 6 different groups playing.
Okay.
One set's going to be some prog. There's going to be some Rush and King Crimson.
Great.
Which I've been drafted to play on as well, some. And then there's going to be a set with some Billy Cobham Spectrum style stuff. His album from, I believe that was 72 when Spectrum came out. I think.
Wow.
With
50 years ago.
Yeah. Wow. So yeah, that's February 8th at the Visualite. That's probably the next exciting thing I've got going on a creative level.
Well, that's good because this podcast is coming out in the first week of February.
Oh, great!
So that gives ample time for folks to check out the tickets and things like that and get things rolling.
Oh, good. Yeah, and it's for a good cause too. Mm-hmm. So
awesome. So Curtis, if we want to get in touch with Curtis Wingfield, find out about all the stuff that you're doing, how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can go to curtiswingfieldmusic.com.
And any social media stuff that we were talking about?
Yeah, I've got Curtis Wingfield Music on Facebook and on Instagram. It's just at Curtis Wingfield Music, and also Jazz is Led for both of those.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you can find my other bands, 20 Ride and Southside Station, on there as well.
Fantastic.
Just from searching the names.
Awesome. All right. Well, Curtis, thank you for coming on the Queen City Music Podcast, man. It was great having you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, man. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to episode 64 of the Queen City Music Podcast, and I hope you'll go back and check out past episodes. And if you can be so kind as to go and leave a review, I'd really appreciate it. You can find the QCMP on all your favorite streaming platforms. As always, if you have an idea for an episode or would like to be a guest on the QCMP, reach out to me at qcmusicpodcast@gmail.com. Also, check out our local partners. Records on the Wall at rexonthewall.com. Reporting from 20XX at reportingfrom20xx.wordpress.com. Queen City Live at Instagram.com/Queen City Live Music. And Charlotte New Music at charlottenewmusic.org. Until next month, be well and stay safe.